So I almost had 2 videos completely edited, and then through entirely my own fault, those 2 videos were deleted. And if you've ever tried losing a school assignment or a work project right there at the finish line, there is really nothing that is more demotivating than knowing that I would have to go back in and reshooting those videos, re-editing, all that stuff. Instead, I'm going to give you a quick video talking about one of the most fun experiences that I've had at the table, one of the biggest plot twists that I've managed to pull off. It's not just going to be a story, we're also going to talk about how I set up that plot twist, and I'll talk a bit about how you can maybe set up a similar situation in your game. So first, a bit of backstory. This story revolves around a character by the name of Milando, and yes, that is the titular character on Milando's Guide to Magical Marbles, which is also coincidentally on the webshop right now. There's a link to that in the description down below. Milando has been a character in our main game for several years, and he's gone through the Waterdeep Dragon Heist campaign, parts of Ghosts of Solas, and parts of Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, during which, and mild spoilers here, they managed to redeem Sariel, the Archangel, and return her to Lathander's side. And after Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus wrapped up, the campaign arc that I decided on was that Milando was going to go find his estranged wife, which he'd left down in the Underdark. And that was a mini campaign that took them through the Underdark and the Shadowfell to eventually find this estranged wife with a cult of Shadow Dragon assassins. And they tried to free her. She was already an undead creature, and they had a final battle with the big bad ancient Shadow Dragon assassin leader, and unfortunately they lost this battle. They just managed to escape with their lives, and Milando's wife were unfortunately destroyed in the process, leaving her without a soul or anything that could be resurrected. So after that campaign wrapped up, I didn't want them to go back into the Underdark to gain vengeance. We'd already been to Hell in the Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. We'd done a lot of urban adventuring in Saltmarsh and Waterdeep and Baldur's Gate, so I wanted to do something that was new, and what I settled on was that I thought it would be cool if the characters would go to Celestia, because the heavens aren't really a place that we get to explore that much in D&D, because usually characters are mostly good aligned, and there's no real reason for them to go to Celestia and to do battle with angels and celestials. It's a bit harder to set up, so that's exactly what I wanted to do. So in order to do that, I gave the characters some downtime. They could describe what was happening and so on, and then I started the next session proper with Milando receiving a dream vision from Sariel, which they had redeemed during the Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus campaign. And Sariel, who was now in Celestia, told him that there was actually a way that they could bring back his wife, because the souls of deceased undead creatures weren't just completely lost forever, they were actually kept in a soul prison of sort in Celestia. So if Milando and his companions would go to Celestia, they could actually break into this prison. The other angels wouldn't approve, so Milando and his companions would have to sneak into heaven and liberate the soul from there, open this soul prison. In order to do that, Sariel would send one of her agents to them very shortly. And then the dream vision ended because shadow assassins were coming to take vengeance on the characters, attacking them in the middle of the night. And during that very tough and harrowing battle, this agent of Sariel and Aasimar Warlock showed up to help the characters and thus also gain their trust. After the battle, he gave them some tools they would need to break into heaven, and also some directions on maybe where to start, stuff like that. So the scene was set for the characters to go to heaven. I won't bore you with the details of what followed, but basically the characters visited with various powerful creatures such as Mordenkainen, which they previously had a relationship with, and they also went to places like the Astral Sea. They went to the portal city of Sigil, and in the end they found themselves in Celestia, where they had to battle their ways through a few layers of Celestia, or sneak their way through a few layers of Celestia, before arriving at the place where this soul prison was supposed to be. Now the characters had been given 2 objects by this Aasimar Warlock. They'd been given a powerful magical scroll that would be able to unlock this soul prison and free the soul of Milando's dead wife, and they had also received a magical flute that was supposed to incapacitate the celestial guardians of this soul prison. So as Milando and his companions walked up to this soul prison, they were immediately accosted by 3 powerful Solas representing the deities of that layer in heaven. Milando played the flute, and instead of just immobilizing these Solas, the Solas were instead just cast adrift in the multiverse, sent to different planes of existence, which of course cleared the way for Milando and his companions to read the scroll and unlock this soul prison. As they did so, they immediately realized that they had been deceived, because it wasn't a soul prison holding souls of undead creatures and so on. It was an abyssal gate. A gate that had been made during the time of creation between the Abyss and Celestia, and as soon as this opened, hellfire began spewing out and demons began climbing out of this hole in the ground that grew and grew, and the skies above Celestia began roiling. A huge demon lord also climbed out of this abyssal portal, and it was the demon lord Grast, which Milando had a brief run-in through an intermediary back in Baldur's Gate Descent in Avernus, where he had attuned to a cursed magic item that was one of Grast's inventions, which had created a link between the two. Now, Milando's player had completely forgotten this point, which was probably a year or more in the past, but I, of course, hadn't forgotten it, and I'd weaved that into the story. Because it was, in fact, Grast and not Zariel that had showed himself to Milando in this dream vision, and it was, in fact, Grast's agent, this Aasimar warlock, not Zariel's agent. This set up a very, very fun and very epic campaign for these 14, 15 level characters, where they had to go and find these Solas that have been scattered across the multiverse so they could restore and close this abyssal portal before Heavens itself, and then the rest of the multiverse were ran over by demons. But what was also just immensely satisfactory in this moment were the disbelief on my players' faces as they realized that they'd been completely tricked into potentially causing the doom of the multiverse. And it was, well, a huge payoff, of course, for me, but also for them, because they got so invested in the next part of the campaign, because it was their fault that the world was going to end and they had to fix it. Now, there's a few things I did here that I'll explain that I think could help you set up a similar plot twist in your game. And the first is, of course, to draw on things that have happened in previous campaigns. So what I drew on were Zariel, who's been redeemed. It's not just some random celestial approaching Milando, it's someone who he believes he has a tie-in with and someone who he knows owes him a favor. So it makes sense for Zariel to go out on a limb and say, you can do this in Celestia, I can't really help you, I'll help you a little. That sort of made sense to Milando and the other characters, and that's why they didn't question that so much. They didn't question why Zariel would come to them with this information. Another thing I did was immediately making this traitor, this Aasimar warlock agent that was supposedly of Zariel, show up at an opportune moment and help the characters, immediately seeming like their friend. Hey, I'm coming to help you, I'm defeating these shadow assassins for you, and I'm going to give you these valuable tools you're going to need to make your heavenly heist. And that, of course, made them not question him as much because, hey, he's a good guy, he's just helped us, he seems very nice, he seems very friendly. I also made sure that Zariel actually told the characters that they shouldn't mention this soul prison to anyone because that would sort of make people suspicious, so keep that on the down low. And that was also, of course, because I didn't want the characters to start trying to investigate whether or not there was a soul prison, because there wasn't, there was an abyssal portal, and if they didn't find anything or the people they asked about it didn't know about it, it probably maybe would have raised their suspicions. Even though I had specifically told them this, through Zariel, they actually divulged it to Mordenkainen, which they, of course, visited to figure out how to get into heaven. And I had Mordenkainen reply with, I don't know anything about any soul prison. That's kind of weird, very interesting. I thought I knew all that there was to know about Celestia, but I don't know about that. And at that point, I was afraid that the characters were going to be like, well, does this story even make sense? But fortunately for me, they weren't. But once again, I was willing to take that risk. And the final takeaway is, don't make it so that the characters have no way to figure out the plot twist. Allow them to figure it out. Give them some outs to figure it out. Because if the players are sitting there at the end going, well, we asked about the soul prison and he said he knew about it, and we were told this by that other character that definitely wasn't lying, that can instead make it feel like they were just railroaded to become plot twisted. You need to allow for the characters to actually figure out that they're being deceived. That may not be as satisfactory as an actual plot twist, but it will be satisfactory for the players to sort of get a sense of accomplishment if they figure out that they're being deceived before actually falling into the trap. If you have your own stories of plot twists in your game, I would love to hear them in the description down below. How did you manage to deceive the players? What was the fallout and how did you manage to pull it off? I'd love to read those stories if you have them. Now I've just talked a lot about the Seven Heavens and Celestials, and in that vein I want to let you know that we've just announced our next Kickstarter, which is Heretic's Guide to Devotion and Divinity, which will be a compendium on all things religion in Dungeons & Dragons. So it'll feature relic hunts, new celestial creatures that the characters would actually have a reason to fight, and of course also divine NPCs, a lot of cool magic items. So if you want a new cool book from Eventyr Games, you can check that out in the description down below. We'd love to have you following along. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.